And currently, the members of parliament are preparing to start questioning the Cabinet Secretary for Agriculture, Matiangi and Aden, at Parliament, of course, in the sugar situation that we have in the country, where it is said that close to 1 million tons of sugar was imported last year during the window period for import duty-free sugar that was brought into the country. Of course, we'll be crossing over to Parliament to listen to the members of Parliament questioning the Cabinet Secretary for Agriculture, and of course, so many others are lined up to appear. We have a Cabinet Secretary for the National Treasury, Henry Rotich, is supposed to appear, and also Fred Matiangi, who we understand has requested for another date. He was scheduled to appear at about 2 o'clock, and thereafter the Cabinet Secretary in charge of Trade, Aden Mohammed, is supposed to appear before the committee. But just before we cross over to Parliament, we're joined by Gorge Kithi, a lawyer, and also an analyst on matters to do with public. And first of all, as we expect the members of Parliament to start questioning the Cabinet Secretary for Agriculture, and of course those others that have been lined up, do you think we will get somewhere with these investigations being conducted by Parliament?
Well, the purpose of investigation is to unravel the procedures and the acts or omissions against which sugar found itself in the market in a manner that is being questioned. Now, when an issue is due for investigation, it means an allegation is obtaining. When an allegation is obtaining, it is for facts to be unearthed.
Right.
So when an allegation is made, it's ordinarily negative, because then it presupposes that a wrong has been committed.
Mm-hmm.
However, the strictures of investigation will be that that which is a pointer to a malfeasance having been committed is what needs to be unraveled, meaning that there is a paper trail that could be involved. There are people, actual human beings, who transacted from one place to the other. There is an offshore, in fact, a sea transportation plethora of documentation, including the order forms, bills of lading, and everything that brought the sugar here. And then there are clearances at the port, and also payments or otherwise, or exemptions that followed through until the sugar was transported by whatever means, either by road or by rail, to whatever godowns that are there.
Right.
All those constitute a matrix of investigation that inform the sum total of what needs to be raveled. Then after that, of course, the licensing aspect. If the licensing aspect was such that it was not coordinated to satisfy only the market, that then would then have prompted the demand, because it's a question of demand and the supply then, and whether then the commodity that was brought is in accordance with the specifications that otherwise were the permitted ones. Because if there was a blanket importation as opposed to specification, then importation of sugar for whatever reason becomes insulated, and yet if it was for human consumption, then it has to be within the confinement of either our standards or international standards.
Right, and Gorge Kithi will be discussing more into that, but what we understand now is that at this hour, the managing director of the Kenya Bureau of Standards, that is Charles Ongwae, alongside 12 others, have been arraigned at the Milimani Law Courts, where they are supposed to be facing charges. We are yet to establish what those charges are, but of course Hassan Mugambi is on location. We'll be linking up with him later, but as you can see on your screen, that is the process going on in the courtroom at the Milimani Law Courts. The signal may not be as good, but essentially just to confirm that those persons, the officials of the Kenya Bureau of Standards that were arrested on Friday and also through the weekend, have been presented before court and expected to be facing various charges. Of course, that's a story that we'll keep following. But shortly, we'll also be replaying a conversation that we had with one of the companies that have been affected in this sugar probe. We understand the Mr. Rai, Jaswant Rai, who is the owner of West Kenya. And just Kithi, just to focus on that, because we saw a list of several traders that brought sugar into the country being presented by the majority leader of Parliament. At the same time, we also saw members of Parliament and the Senate in the Western Kenya divided. We saw Senator Cleophas Malala leading a host of leaders to the West Kenya company, of course, expressing their solidarity with the Rai company that is accused of importing sugar. But then again, we also see the cabinet secretary in charge of devolution, that is Eugene Omalwa, talking about that this gentleman needs to be arrested. What are we talking about? Why are we having different voices about the same thing?
Well, I think first and foremost, there is the issue of the trade and the industry. What would otherwise affect the industry, that's sugar industry, is the inconsistency of constant supply and manufacture of the sugar. A window then is created ordinarily when there's a shutdown, against which the sugar deficit is created, and therefore demand and supply is oriented. That way then it means sugar has to be imported. It has to be imported by, companies and human beings, and therefore licenses will certainly be given. How that is administratively handled and whether there's an abuse of that window is what then will create the despondency that we see, or otherwise. Those that support will come from the school of thought that one, probably the area the person comes from, whether the jobs created by that window of importation and the fact that the company handles sugar and the benefits surrounding the people that they represent, and therefore the interests of the people or the individuals.
Right.
On the others, there is the government policy and oversight, and therefore whether government policy and oversight has been breached and whether the licensing has been abused, and so on and so forth. So the comfort and discomfort on the whole transaction stems from how a person looks at it. The prism for those that will support must be an interest benefit factor, and for those that condemn it have either nothing to gain out of it, or alternatively it is the oversight that has been abused, or licensing effect otherwise which has been abused, or on the alternative that then there are no interests at all upon which to converse from.
Right. Gorge Kithi, a lawyer and also an analyst on public affairs. Let's cross over to Parliament, because I understand that Mwangi Kinjuri is now speaking to the Joint Committee of the Agriculture and Trade.
Sugar requirements, where the deficit is imported from COMESA and East African community countries. During this period, the imports from COMESA and East African community 113 metric ton in January 2017 to 15,000.
Right, unfortunately having challenges with the audio there. We'll try to rectify that and take you back to the committee room of Parliament to listen to that conversation. And Kithi, now, you said that for those people who are supporting is because they have an interest benefit, and those who are against is maybe they have nothing to lose, or they're just being spoilers, maybe. But at the end of the day, there is the truth that Kenyans deserve. And so far we have seen even the three cabinet secretaries. There's a story that we did, and we saw the cabinet secretary in charge of Interior, Dr. Fred Matiangi, saying that the sugar that they nabbed through their crackdown was poisoned. It had mercury, among other hard metals. Then you saw the cabinet secretary in charge of trade, Aden Mohammed, saying that there is no mercury in any sugar so far that has been assessed by the Kenya Bureau of Standards. Then you see CS for National Treasury, Henry Rotich, saying that he does not understand what is happening. So why would we be in such a situation talking about the same thing, the same government system, but they do not have a position on the same thing? What's happening?
I think when an issue such as this, which threatens careers, which threatens people's liberties, comes up, what happens to the general effect on a person, the human immediate reaction, is to get defensive. Matiangi's approach is accusatory, because he proceeds with the premise that the sugar imported is not food at all, and is not good for human consumption on account of the fact that it's contaminated. Certainly he has not presented evidence for that, but a term such as that coming from one in charge of internal security, certainly then it is canvas for the public consumption, and therefore the public will take it in a manner that it is true unless otherwise proven. But then the one who handles the docket, against which tests have to be done, confirms that there is nothing in contamination as opposing, therefore, one of the government officers who is Matiangi.
Right.
I think Henry Rochit is far removed from the two arguments on account of the fact that probably the licensing effect and oversight is what he will deal with. Because then if he gives a license and a waiver, for instance, for duty or preferential treatment, that then is not the mechanical and administrative handling of sugar. He's removed from it, save for the revenue aspect. So then we narrow it down to the two, whether it's Matiangi or Aden, and who then do we believe? I think that is what then confounds the Kenyan. And it is important because once you're given a position in authority, you take that position on account of the trust that is beholden to the position and for the Kenyan.
Right.
Suffice it to say, therefore, that we therefore need an independent investigation into this issue, and that independent investigation ordinarily is through the structures that we've put into place, including the parliament oversight. Remember, parliament has the representative part. It also legislates, but there's also an oversight obligation and constitution on parliament, because they're democratically elected to represent the people. We can't all be there to check on sugar. That's why then they are conducting the session that we're having now. It is part of the investigative process against all other arms of government. Yet the Directorate of Criminal Investigations, the boss there, that is Gorge Kithi, says that anyone who is trying to believe what CS Aden is saying, it's at their own peril, because he says that he has evidence that there is mercury in the sugar that they nabbed. How then should we be processing this kind of information as Kenyans? We are exposed to all these different sources, the government speaking from different sides of the mouth. I do think there's something unkeeping with and against norm, because government doesn't communicate that way, at least in most of the matters. When this happens, it means some people are defending themselves, some people are preempting. And you know, sometimes you make a pronouncement in public because you realize that there's an attempt to cover up. And sometimes you make a pronouncement in government so that you had certain interests. And therefore, the truth shall only become if then we have the independence of voices, such as those that then are a creature of our structures in the Constitution. I do think the DCI has an immediate direct obligation on the issue. I also do think that Parliament has an immediate direct obligation on the issue. I do think that the pronouncements of Matiangi and those of Aden are conflicted. One, because of the background, and two, in the manner that they have been done. And therefore, when we have conflicting information as is, it not only impairs the investigation, because that becomes part of evidence that will be adduced in case of a dispute that crystallizes into a case. Right. Like now people are being charged in court. But also the alternative to it, then it erodes the public confidence on the very institutions that are relied on by the public. Great, Gorge Kithi there. Now, as we await to go back to Parliament where that probe is happening, let's now listen into Jaswant Rai. He is the owner, he's the chairman of the Rai Group of companies. He has been accused by several quarters, saying that he imported over 180,000 tons of sugar that was contaminated with different elements. And of course, one of those that has been accusing him is Aden Duale, the majority leader at the National Assembly. So let's listen in when we spoke to him earlier, or rather late last week, on what he has to say.
I have not committed any crime. In fact, if you are able to get details of the amount of sugar that was imported last year, was over 1 million tons, or as some people would like to talk about kilos, is over 1 billion kilos of sugar in the year 2017.
So we know as a country, the estimate that we have, the
quantity I brought in accordance with my requirements. And if you look at the production records for the year 2017, each sugar mill, including mine, including others, they were producing at below 50%. What I have brought in is to supplement what I was producing. If you look at the records in 2016, 2015, I have in my two factories, West Kenya and Sukari Industries, produce approximately 180,000 tons of sugar.
When you bring all that sugar, what is your annual production that you release to the market?
The intention is 180,000, so that I would be able to use about 90,000 in 1 year and the other 90,000 in the following year.
But you have also source of sugar locally from the cane farmers.
Yes, but even today, as we speak, even today the situation is every mill is producing below 50% because of the non-availability of cane.
So how do you explain the government security officers go to Eastleigh and find some sugar that has the name, the trademark, Cabras? Understandably, it should be from you because you own that brand.
Correct.
How is that sugar in the market?
You know, when you are a leading brand, people want to, not only with sugar, with different leading brands. You have telephones today which are not genuine. So the easiest way is to go and hit on a leading brand.
Now, let's talk about, we have heard from the government officials, including the Cabinet Secretary for Interior, Dr. Fred Matiangi, saying that the sugar that they have impounded contains some hard metals, talking about mercury, lead, and also it has copper. In your experience as a person, because now you have denied that that sugar impounded is not linked to you, in your experience as a sugar miller, is it a possibility to have these hard metals in sugar?
I have, in my entire life, I have not come across. Now, the fundamental question is, if that metal was found or those impurities were found in this sugar, it needs to be investigated. What is the source of this sugar? Where was it imported from?
Let me take you back to the process of importing sugar, because now on 12th of May, the National Treasury gives a gazette notice that any person who wants to bring in sugar, they can do so. Yes. How is that process like? Like, how do you yourself determine that, yes, I need 180,000, but how do you move forward to ensure that you have that sugar?
You take in all the requirements according to the laws of Kenya. You start with the Sugar Directorate, you have to get a license. You go to Kenya Bureaus of Standard to get that approval. You get the pro forma invoice from the supplier. You get an import declaration form, which is called IDF. And then the shipment takes place. And before it's shipped, is a requirement by KEBS. They have agents throughout the world. In this case, Intertech Brazil was the agent to verify the quality and to certify. For all the imports, not only mine, everybody was importing from Brazil. I've also brought in sugar from Swaziland, which was inspected by SGS.
When you were importing this 180,000 tons, was it an open license from the Sugar Directorate, or did you have to state how much you want to bring in?
I have imported 180. The total importation is over 1 million. My share is only 18%, whereas my production of sugar is much higher.
Mr. Rai, I get that.
Yes, yes, but it's important for you to know, only my name is being splashed all over. Question is why? There's another 820,000 tons imported by other people.
And that's what we're having. Right, that's Jaswant Rai, the chairman of the Rai Group of Companies. We spoke to him sometimes last week on Friday, to be specific, and he is the chairperson, rather the chair of the Rai Group of Companies, and also the owner of West Kenya Sugar, the producers of Cabra Sugar. And of course, this has been a source of some heated debate, whether it's direct or indirect. And as I was telling you, Gorge Kithi, is that Senator Cleophas Malala of Kakamega went there trying to defend the company. And of course, you've seen the Cabinet Secretary for Devolution, Eugene Omalo, saying that he should be charged or arrested and prosecuted, because if he did anything wrong, then he should pay for his mistakes. But he has obviously insisted on his innocence, saying that the sugar that was nabbed in Eastleigh, allegedly being contaminated, is not his. It's just people who are trying to steal the brand that is Cabras and repackaging different sugars into it. But I just want to ask you a specific question, because he's talking about it's not a possibility to have these elements or these hard metals in sugar. In the line of importation of food coming through the port and going through all the processes involving the Kenya Bureau of Standards, is it a possibility to tell that certain food is wrong for the country? And would you know how often that happens?
Yes, it is, because international trade ordinarily has stopgap measures, documentation and inspections throughout the process. It is a very detailed process, and ordinarily the importation of sugar is through sea transportation. At the port of origin, there is always the packaging and the certification that goes on. SGS, we do know, is an international board that ordinarily then will satisfy that, and an agent that is contracted here. Those documents are ordinarily then sent here for purpose of preparation for the goods during transportation, so that by the time they land at the port in Mombasa, every document is available. Apart from the cost implication and pre-shipment documentation, and also at when they land at other ports, the bills of lading and all, the attendant or the parallel steps that are taken are to ensure that the goods that are not that come are not contraband, or they are not unfit for human consumption for foods. Therefore, samples, there must be testing of the product for purposes of ascertainment that they are good for consumption. The problem is it is very difficult to test the entire food package.
Right.
All right. So sampling has its own omissions, because then it means the entire consignment has not been tested. That being so, there must be one, either inadequacy in terms of the process of testing, so that then that which is impure passes, or number two, that because the agents that use every time and those that do the testing are people that are now known to the traders, will be complicit in terms and complacent in terms of handling it to its fullest extent, and therefore there's a bit of compromise, or actual or crystallized compromise in terms of that oversight. Right. Agencies such as KEBS are entrusted with facilities such as labs to check on the consumption propriety of such products. If that is not done properly, or it's not done at all, then it's an omission that then eventually the product is find itself in the market with such omission. However, the truth of the matter is it is slightly difficult, not completely difficult, but slightly difficult for goods imported to fail to comply, because there is, like I've said, the procedure is rife with all the oversights.